What happens in the sky affects life down here on Earth. The Celestial Compass shows you how and guides your way with astrology you can use from professional astrologer Kathy Biehl. Every episode features her light-hearted, practical forecasts and navigational tips, blended with humor, optimism, and a love of patterns, symbolism, and pop culture references. Kathy translates technicalities into concepts that apply to real life. You'll learn how the current moment ties to where we've been, from the recent past to cycles that last happened years ago, and get a look at where we're heading. And much more, from special topics to special guests. The Celestial Compass, enlightening, entertaining, and empowering. Here's your host, Kathy Biehl.
Greetings, Earthlings. This is Kathy Biehl of EmpowermentUnlimited.net, and this week we have an example of applied astrology, taking what is going on in the sky and exploring how it can actually be lived out here on the planet by some people who are doing it in a very exciting way. Now, everybody has dreams. Everybody has dreams that they think of, oh, someday I'd like to, but how many of us actually go ahead and make those dreams happen? And our guests today are poster children for the song from Rocky Horror Picture Show, Don't Dream It, Be It. And how does this fit astrologically? We are moving from a preponderance of energy in the dream world, in the sign of Pisces, that came to its peak in the middle of April. And this month, in May, as we're recording this, energy is moving more and more and more into fiery, passionate, impulsive, self-starting Aries. By the end of the month, we'll all just be on fire, going after and whatever it is we want. And our guests today have been doing this to some extent for all the years that I have known them. And they are Sue Reddel and Diana Laskaris. Sue is an advertising, marketing, and social media strategist, as well as an adjunct professor at Roosevelt University. Diana is a business and communication strategist and certified subconscious behaviorist, as well as an author, screenwriter, and attorney, which is how I first met her. Together, they are co-founders of Food Travel Network. Now you're paying attention, right? One of the first travel companies to promote sustainable and responsible culinary tourism. They've recently relocated with their 2 cats from the United States to Portugal. And I think you're at your 1-year anniversary of that move. Welcome, Sue and Diana.
Thanks, Kathy.
Hi, Kathy.
I would like to back up and talk about the longer arc of how you got to Portugal. Because you started out with a certain approach to career, and then that evolved and evolved and evolved. So what tell us about that.
Well, I'll start, Kathy. This is Sue, and I can tell you I spent about 30 years working in the advertising business at a rather large advertising agency in Chicago. I had spent my entire life, living in Chicago, and I was kind of at a plateau in my career and wondering what to do next, and so I decided to kind of break free from the corporate handcuffs, if you will, and start up my own business, and become a consultant. And as luck would have it, because I think as much as the stars may have something to do with what influences us and what goes around, I also think luck has a lot to do with it as well. The company I worked for hired me as a consultant, and so I was lucky enough to work for them, for several years after I had left as a full-time employee. And at that point, Diana and I were thinking about what we wanted to do together. So I think that we had many conversations about what we wanted to do together.
And
Before we explore that, Diana, and you came into this through screenwriting and law, is my understanding.
Yeah, as you know, I was a business attorney and still am to some extent, but my life always has followed two tracks, the practical one and the creative one. So I started my sort of junior adult life as a screenwriter and a playwright, and I always have written on my own time and for fun. Law, as you know, Kathy, is a profession that involves a lot of writing, so it suited me in that regard. But I continue to feel a stronger and stronger pull towards getting back to my roots, which is in creative writing and fiction and things of that sort. Along the way, I became quite enamored with cooking and learning about cultures through food. My father is a very avid cook himself and taught me a lot in the kitchen. So through my love of food and Sue's love of travel, we kind of melded the two things together and came up with a concept for our original website, which was much broader in scope and covered sort of all kinds of aspects of lifestyle. And what we found people were attracted to over and over again was food and travel, food and travel. So we did a little bit of research and discovered that there was actually a sector of the travel industry and hospitality industry called culinary tourism. And this was back a decade ago. So there wasn't really much out there for the average person to look at. And yet they were being segmented this way by the industry. So we actually took a course from an organization called the World Food Travel Association, and we became certified culinary travel professionals, and we learned about all the different reasons people travel and incorporate unique and memorable food and travel experiences. And we honed in on the idea of food and travel for the consumer and connecting people who love food and travel with destinations that are trying to reach them. And so we came up with the idea for Food Travelist, which is the ultimate expression of food travel network on the internet.
And besides your website, you've been hosting a live Twitter food travel chat for years, right?
Yeah, we have. Yeah, we have. We've actually moved on from the chat, and we've left it in the hands of one of our very capable moderators so that we can pursue more activities specifically regarding Portugal and regarding what we found as an experience moving from the United States, being sort of pre-retirement, but seeing a lot of people very interested in the idea of moving abroad, and managing that process is extremely challenging. So there are many professionals who handle the sort of legal and visa and economic aspects of it. But we've been finding ourselves more and more providing support for the social side, because it's also not just you're picking up and leaving, your house and your things in some cases to move into this new life, but you're also leaving behind a lot of friends and family. And one of the things that we found really helpful when we first moved here was someone reached out to us and said, hey, we know that you're moving here. We'd love to take you out and get to know you. And through that initial meeting, that was literally the first week we arrived, we've made, dozens and dozens of friends in the expat world. And as we become more fluent in Portuguese, we start to make more Portuguese friends as well.
So let's step back a little bit and explore how you got to that leap. Now, when I first met you, you guys were living in Chicago, and you were open to being somewhere else at that point. What was the thought process like, and the emotional process of preparing yourself to leave a place where you had been rooted for a long time?
Well, I think, first of all, again, I say luck, plays a really important part of this. I mean, obviously we had traveled all over the United States, we had traveled over the world, and, occasionally, time to time, we would talk about, moving somewhere. And as luck would have it, one day our doorbell rang and one of our neighbors, who happened to be a real estate agent, said, have you ever thought about selling your home? And it was like, what? It was like kind of in the middle of doing things like cooking dinner or whatever. It's like, wait, stop. Kind of, but not today. It's like, well, she said, do you mind me taking a look at your house? I have a client who is very interested in your house and very interested in living in this block. We lived in kind of a unique block in Chicago, in the very far west end. That was more like almost like a suburban neighborhood, but yet still in the city, very large yards, gardens, things like that. So they were very drawn to the neighborhood and then specifically to our house. And so they came and looked at the house and said, yeah, we'd like to make an offer on your house. And we said, that's great, but we have like no idea where we're going to go. So our whole like kind of selling your house thing was completely backwards to like what most people do, right? And so we said, give us some time, and, we're not ready right now, but, just give us some time. And they said, well, whenever you are ready, please let us be your first call. And, we'll kind of hold out, that someday you're going to move, and then we hope it's soon, right? But of course, that spurred on the whole conversation of, okay, this is something we have definitely talked about before. And where would we go, right? And so, because we were doing what we were doing with Food Travelist, it made it very easy for us to not only continue to travel to places all over the globe, but look at them with an eye to, gee, could we live here? And so it was kind of advantageous, for us to be able to do that, right? And so we were checking places off a list and putting places on a list, as we did that. So to your question, yes, there was a lot of forethought at that point into places we thought we would be very comfortable in. I guess the big stumbling block for me at this point was I had never lived anywhere else except for when I went away to college. It's like, and so I was really rooted, in Chicago. My family was all in Chicago. Diana had already moved, several times in her life to different places around the United States and out of the country. So for her, it wasn't going to be as big of a jump. So we decided that the first jump would be somewhere close to home rather than far away, even though we did kind of mumble a little bit about, moving out of the country. And so we moved to Madison, Wisconsin, which was literally 2 hours away from Chicago. I mean, not really.
And yet a world away.
Yeah, so yet a world away.
Well, was that kind of like like training wheels for you, Sue? The notion of, all right, I'm now in a different place.
Absolutely, Kathy. It was a test drive of, can Sue do this? And I think Diana felt pretty confident that she could do this. But I will tell you, and you ask about emotions and things like that. Our first move, and then we moved from a really large house into a small apartment, well, smaller than a house, right? Up in Wisconsin. So we downsized dramatically. So first we had that hurdle of that emotion of kind of getting rid of things that maybe you had for many years of your life, or things that had emotional attachments, so we went through that process, together, first, and then, me with the emotion of leaving a place that had been home for me for so long. And I think I did okay, and it didn't take me long to kind of like settle in and say, oh, changing the place is not really that big of a deal. We were, still doing the same work. We can do the work that we do anywhere, which we learned really easily in our first move. So that was really good. And we settled in there, until, then, we started getting kind of comfortable there, and then the pandemic hit. So, that was the thing that kind of put a wrench into our plans at that point, because we had already talked about we knew that Wisconsin was not going to be our forever home after being there for probably about a year and a half, something like that, and we had decided that we were going to start looking at other places. And frankly, I was on my very first trip to Portugal in 2017, and I fell in love with it almost immediately as soon as I stepped off the plane. The first place we went to, I was on a press trip, was Óbidos, which is a very small medieval walled city, in the middle of Portugal. And I really test anyone to go there and not fall in love with this place because it is amazing. It has all the feels, and immediately feel at home because everyone welcomes you from the moment you arrive. That frankly happens everywhere in Portugal, but specifically for me, I mean, I called Diana. I was there probably like an hour, and I called Diana at home and said, I think I could live here. I mean, we recount this story all the time.
Wow.
And,
Okay, all right. So it was taking the risk was energizing for you.
Oh, for sure. And me being the Cancer crab, for me to call and make a statement like that was pretty earth-shattering for Diana.
It certainly got my attention anyway.
Yeah, well, home being so big. So, and what about the adjustment of just the daily routine of life going from Chicago to Wisconsin? Did that open you to, well, this wasn't so bad, I could do this more? Or because I'm really looking for process here. How did you experience that?
Definitely the first stop in Wisconsin was the feeling of, okay, I don't have to live in one place. I can live somewhere else. I stayed in contact with the family very closely. They would come up because it was only 2 hours away. They would come up all the time. We would go back to Chicago, and so it didn't feel that far away for me. And yet we were starting to create new friends and just a new reality in a new place. So and it happened very quickly. Wisconsin, and that part of Wisconsin specifically, is very beautiful. So I think that we were very fortunate, that we lived in a place, especially after the pandemic hit, that was very comfortable. And it was also out our back window, after our back porch was a forest, and out our front window was a cornfield. It's like, so we were really, I think we felt much more attuned to nature there than we did in Chicago.
And with that, we're going to pause for our first break. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. Everybody hang on.
The cutting edge of conscious radio, OMTimes Radio, IOM FM. Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network.
Grab a cup of tea or a glass of wine and tune in for Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Linda creates sacred space for leading female luminaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. A soulful venue where guests openly share the fears and obstacles they've overcome, wisdom and lessons learned, and the personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic, soulful living.
Want help with your own celestial compass? Visit my site, empowermentunlimited.net, for Astro Insight forecasts for each week, month, and new and full moon. Want to explore the personal impact? Make a decision? Understand another person? It is possible. Click the Services tab to book a personal session with me. That address again, empowermentunlimited.net.
If I could be you,
and you could be me,
for just 1 hour.
If you could find a way
to get inside
each other's mind.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
We've all felt left out. And for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Welcome back to Celestial Compass. Today we're talking with Sue Reddel and Diana Laskaris, the founders of Food Travel Network and poster children for our theme of Don't Dream It, Just Be It. Now, I have kind of a two-part question I would like to move on with first. And the two-parters are the process of opening your mind up to living outside the United States, and then how the pandemic played into that. So you were already thinking, because I remember when you were still in Chicago, you were open to the notion of another country. How did that go? How did that work? Because people don't automatically think, oh, well, I mean, some people do. Some people have a reaction to events and go, well, I'll just leave the country. But you actually seriously considered it.
Well, I think part of it was that we kind of, in the back of our minds, had this idea of moving to particularly Europe for a while. I lived in Europe for a time when I was younger. I have a lot of relatives and family there. And I think it was just sort of in the back of my mind. I always kind of thought, well, I'm probably going to end up in Europe someday, And I think that what happened with the pandemic was it really pulled into focus for us how virtual the world is, and a lot of the things that Sue was hanging on to were things that she could still participate in and people she could still see, even though we weren't all together physically in the same room. And for a couple of years, most of us lived our lives that way. We really didn't have the ability to go hug relatives or see the new baby or visit grandma. And I think it kind of shadowed what we were concerned about in moving, which was breaking ties, leaving behind the things that we cherished in our lives. As wonderful as something is that you're moving toward, there's this little voice in the back of your head saying, well, but it's never going to be the same. And I think the pandemic really brought into our field of view, things were never going to be the same anyway. And so we really, I think, opened up our minds to the possibility of looking at our lives through the lens of what will make us happy, no matter what's going on in the rest of the world, what's going to feed our souls and give us the positive energy and the environment where we can thrive. Because I think for myself, I really had started to wallow a little bit, and I was feeling that I wasn't growing. I was doing a lot of the same work over and over again, quite repetitive. And the only times I got a little bit of a spark was when I would change that dynamic and go back to the thing I love, which has always been writing. And obviously, traveling during the pandemic was something we really couldn't do. So that cut out half of the conversation when you're talking about food and travel. So we began focusing more on food, and we had some success with that. But I think everyone in our audience and ourselves, we just hungered for this ability to explore culture. And with Sue's experience in Portugal, and then we had gone on another couple of trips and seen more extensively the country and the islands that are also part of the Portuguese nation. We both fell in love with it. And I think at that point we were, sort of lost our anchor in the United States overall and said, let's go towards something we really love. And we both really love Portugal, and we think we can make a beautiful life there. And what's holding us here, and we really explored that and found that the fears we had about letting go sort of evaporated as we became more confident that, first of all, Portugal itself is at the very edge of Western Europe, and a flight to the United States could be a 6-hour flight to perhaps cozy Lake, New Jersey.
Perhaps.
And it's just as simple as that. Some of the complications came in the mechanics and moving, 2 cats and 2 people and almost none of their stuff, but enough stuff that you have to ship it, and some of those things. And it's a very long process, even when it goes smoothly, which ours relatively did. And so we started planning and got some support from people who were familiar with the process and could help us with the innumerable forms and paperwork and approvals and stuff you have to do. So we started quite well in advance, and anywhere along the way it could have been derailed, but it wasn't. And I think as time moved on, we became more and more confident that that was the right choice for us, and the move was something we really wanted to do.
So, one thing I'm hearing, going back a couple of thoughts in what you've been saying, it sounds like your experience during the pandemic of the change in socializing served a training wheels function, much like moving to Wisconsin from Chicago did. Like you tried out a different way of being. It wasn't that you just went, okay, I'm going to leap across this huge abyss and now do this. You backed into it or experienced it incrementally, and not intentionally, it just worked out that way.
Yeah, definitely. And as you mentioned at the front of the shows, I teach at Roosevelt University, and I taught in person when I was living in Chicago. And when we moved to Wisconsin, they were kind enough to, offer to keep me, on staff and offer my classes online, so and that was before the pandemic. So it was really kind of, again, lucky, for me to be able to already have my classes online, everything already prepared, already working on Zoom, working with students, that when we were all forced into that Zoom environment through the university, I was already kind of ahead of the game on that. And it was very clear that it really didn't matter for me where, I was. And so I was able to connect, with my students and the university, despite the fact I wasn't in Chicago anymore. And it was really interesting because I've made some really great connections with a lot of the students, that I teach there. In fact, one even came back this semester, who was going through the honors program and asked me to be her mentor, so I helped her, this past the spring semester, with her honors thesis that she just completed and did a rock star job, I have to say, but our relationship started through the pandemic, and I think that being able to connect that way made me think about what I did in a different way. It forced it forced it to happen, and kind of, I think it ended up, working out very well. I mean, obviously, I still teach. Despite the fact that I'm here in Portugal, it's like we, work around the time differences and make sure that we can meet at times that work for everybody, and I think for the most part it works out pretty well.
So I'm going to reframe one thing that you've said repeatedly in a way that might be accessible for people who are listening to this. You have multiple times talked about luck. I don't discount that was a factor of it, but each time you were offered something and you were willing to consider it and accept it. Rather, because some people will just block and go, oh, no, I couldn't do that. But you had an openness to life being on offer for you. Yeah.
Sure, and what do they say? That luck is when opportunity meets preparation. I think that for Sue, particularly, if she hadn't had the experience of moving to Wisconsin, if she hadn't had the experience of dealing with people virtually and understanding that you can keep those connections, it may have taken us a lot longer to make such a big move to another country. But I think she was prepared, like you said, had training wheels on a couple of the things that were most concerning to her. And I think by the time we got our visa accepted and we were getting ready to go, I think both of us were more on the positive and anticipating how, exciting and wonderful it was going to be to get here, rather than focusing on what we were leaving behind.
Right. And I think, Kathy, your point of being open, to something that's different, completely different, or something new, is really important. And I think that you did, hit the nail on the head on that one, because I think both of us are very in tune, with our intuition and things that come along to us and say, this could be a good opportunity, or this is something that we should really explore and really move through that thing. And admittedly, there are times when we think about something and do it that it doesn't work out, but because not everything does work out, right? He's like, but I think the more things that you try, and the more opportunities you let yourself get involved into, you have more of an opportunity to be successful and be happy. Ultimately, because that's, I think we're very happy with the decisions that we've made, over the last, decade and a half, so I think that that's worked for us.
Or as my mom would always say, if you throw enough spaghetti at the wall, some of it's bound to stick.
But you've also had a willingness, in my observation over the years that I've known you, you've had a willingness to, okay, now let's try this. Okay, now let's try this. I mean, some people get into a rut, and granted, you don't have the obligations that some segments of society do by this point in life. It's not like you have children and grandchildren, or you're caring for elderly parents on a daily basis or anything.
Right.
So you had a level of maneuverability that some people might not have, but you also have a mindset of, I can do something about this. Well, let me try this. There's a self-starting, I'll do this, I'll try this, and then I'll go for plan B. If plan A doesn't work, we'll go for plan C, and I'll open a good bottle of wine while I'm doing it, so.
Well, yeah. One of the funny things, Kathy, is I think you know that I'm a certified hypnotherapist as well as a lawyer and writer and all these other fun things. And I got into that after living in New York when 9/11 occurred. And I decided to make a U-turn and try something different with my career, and became involved in hypnotherapy and neurolinguistic programming and several other modalities. And one of the presuppositions of neurolinguistic programming is that if something doesn't work, try something else. And I think we, for lack of experience or creativity or whatever, often will think that if we do something over and over again, that somehow it will change. The result will be different. And more often than not, if you do the same thing over and over again, you're going to get the same result. And I think when you reach a point in your life where you want a different result, being open to doing things a different way, or to trying something new, or, taking a deep breath and a leap of faith, you might get a different result. And it might be the result you were hoping for, it might be some other result, but it's not going to be the same. And I think we were both at a point where we were willing to take the risk of getting a different result, but it was important to us to shift into a new life.
And it sounded to me like the move to Wisconsin was, okay, we'll try this. And then it became clear after a while, like, well, this is not the final jump. We're going to try something else.
Yeah, I think for me, I probably always had in the back of my head that Wisconsin was just a training ground. It was a kind of a compromise that, how people from different points of view get along together by making compromises. I think I probably was ready much sooner than Sue was, but we had looked at some other even further away places than Wisconsin, and she was comfortable with that move, and I knew it was enough of a move that she would be able to see whether or not it worked for her. And fortunately it did, and we just kind of went from there. I think we both came to the same realization at the same time that we were ready for a move overseas. And I think that moving to Wisconsin was kind of crucial to Sue's evolution and being able to comfortably come to that decision.
So it sounds like there's a fair amount of self-reflection, honesty with the self, candor, and then candor with each other in this.
Absolutely. I think communication is so essential because we weren't really coming from the same place at the same time. I think we ended up there. But if I want to do this now, it would have been disastrous. And I don't know that I was actually prepared either. I just am a little bit more of a risk taker. And so I think that if we didn't communicate, there could have been a lot of hurt feelings, a lot of anger, a lot of disappointment. And so it's essential to have an open communication as well as an open mind.
Yeah, and I think that the interesting thing is once we kind of both knew that Wisconsin wasn't going to be our forever home, I was the one who said, let's look at Portugal. And I think that, and Diana let me get there in my own time, which as she was really crucial to that thing, because when I look back now, with those words coming out of my mouth, and of course the months thereafter between when I said that and when we moved here, how many times I said, what the heck was I thinking? It's like, this is a monumental move. All the process that you have to, just the process alone, and downsizing again. And just when I think, I thought we got rid of everything. It's like, oh my God, we didn't get rid of anything. And it's just that whole process, and you're, intellectually, you're like, this is good, I want to do this, but then emotionally, you just go down so many rabbit holes, all the time. And on top of this, the time when we decided to do this, we're in the pandemic, so we're already holed up, together anyway, but on top of it, we had made the decision that we weren't going to tell anyone. I think that only like maybe 2 of our friends knew, that we weren't going to tell family and too many friends what we were doing in case it kind of fell apart, or these things happen. Sometimes visas don't get approved and things happen. We hear it all the time. With people trying to come to Portugal or other countries for that matter. And so we had, said this is going to be us doing this, and we're just keeping. So we were like this solid front of okay, it's like, and people would would say kind of stuff like, oh, next year we're going to do this. I'm like, okay. We just really didn't say much of anything, and because we were still in the pandemic and the thick of things, I think, we weren't traveling, of course, and all of that, and I think people were kind of like, what are you guys doing, and when we finally did the big reveal, of what we were doing, I think for the most part, there was not a big surprise. I mean, it wasn't a big, oh my gosh, what the heck are you guys doing? It was more of a, I think a lot of people, because we had talked so much about how much we loved Portugal at nauseum, to people that they were like, you're moving, and of course you're going to Portugal, because everybody knew, anyone who knew us very well, knew how much we really enjoyed, being there, and how much I personally connected, with the people here, the culture here. And I think, people that travel a lot, when you go places, there's certain places that you go that you just feel this deep kind of connection with. And I mean, I have felt that in Germany, I've felt that in Portugal, I've felt that in France. And it's just, but in Portugal, it was even more so.
And with that, I'm going to interrupt you for just a second. We'll have our final break of the show. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. Everyone hang on.
Bringing a more conscious lifestyle to your world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
How would you like navigational tools you can use on your own? Visit my site, empowermentunlimited.net, and click the Shop tab. There you'll find lots of talks and guides explaining the big influences at work now, like Saturn in Aquarius and Uranus in Taurus. You'll also find a variety of guided visualizations for relaxing, clearing your energy, or getting to know planetary archetypes. That address again, empowermentunlimited.net.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
You came across someone struggling with hunger. How would you recognize them? Would you notice an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for summer break
because she may not be having lunch again until September?
Or a war veteran who's having a hard time landing a job
and getting back on his feet?
I am the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger. I am hunger in America.
Hunger can be hard to recognize. Learn why at IamHungerInAmerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to Celestial Compass. We're talking about actually making a dream into reality and making big changes in your life. And we're talking with Sue Reddel and Diana Laskaris, who followed their dreams into adventure and rewrote their lives a couple of times and are now happily living in Portugal. Their 1-year anniversary of it. Something you were talking a little bit about, Sue, right before the break, actually dovetails with a question that I have written here, which is, has there been a moment of rethinking or doubt or uh-oh, besides the downsizing aspect?
Yeah.
Did you ever second guess yourself?
Oh my gosh, yeah, probably a million times before we left the United States, especially when you're in the chaos of trying to get paperwork together and, during a pandemic. I mean, silly thing, it's not silly, but you have to get your fingerprints done, and that's one of the things you need to do. And I won't go into all the detail of it, but let's just say it turned into a kind of a mess because there was only one police department, this small little place in Middleton, Wisconsin, that was open only certain days, certain hours. And we went and got ours done. And of course, mine didn't turn out right. And I had to go back and get them. And they had to be there at a certain time and date and everything. And it was just like a Keystone Cops of, running around trying to get everything done. And there were certain days where it was like, is this all worth it? All this, trying to go, get all this paperwork and get it done. And do we know what we're doing? And all this kind of thing. But then it was really, what I thought was really interesting about it is like, we never had that feeling at the same time. Like I would have it and then, then I'd work through it and Diana would help me work through it and then Diana would do it and then I'd be like, oh no, it's fine. And I'd work her through it. So it was like, never at the same time were we like, we're crazy, don't do this. I think we helped each other immensely, going through that process as I said before, because we were really just doing it together. There wasn't a lot of people to lay off, tension on and kind of say, I can't believe this is happening, because we were doing it as a party of two, so I think that was difficult, but it was something that every time we got through the next hurdle, it was like, okay, this is going to happen now. It's like, so it was a positiveness, even though there were kinks along the way and doubts along the way. In the end, it really turned into a lot of positiveness of how we were able to get these things done despite the bumps in the road. And, as you've mentioned before, it's like we really are good at kind of zigging and zagging. If something gets stuck, it's like, okay, this doesn't work. What do we do now? It's like, so we are really good at that, and I think that came out really strong during the moving process.
And how's the adjustment been? Because I've lived in a foreign country, and even when things on the surface are kind of similar to what there's a level of culture shock in details that you might not have expected.
There's definitely a lot of difference between Portugal and the United States. That's on a deep cultural level, history, the nature of the people. But for us, it's all been good. I think the process of unraveling the things that you miss, certain things that you can't find at the grocery store, for example, or certain places that you go. And if you encounter people who don't speak English and your Portuguese is not quite up to snuff, it's a challenging language to learn and it takes a while. But everybody goes after everything with such good cheer. It really has influenced me, I think, to the extent that I just try to relax and go with the flow much more. I mean, we always say you have to pack your patience. No matter what else you pack, the patience is essential, both to keep yourself from going crazy and to keep everybody around you from going crazy. We actually wrote a book called What Should I Do Now? When we realized we were making the kinds of large life decisions that people often make. And we've done it several times in our lives, both independently and together. And when the pandemic hit, we realized there were an awful lot of people out there who, for whatever reason, whether their company was no longer working, we obviously know a lot of people in the restaurant industry, which had a horrible time. Helping, go through the process that we each have gone through in our own lives and kind of codifying it and putting it into a 2-week process where you can go through every aspect of your life and ask yourself those kinds of questions. And it's not really about making the decision of, do I want to move somewhere? Do I want a new job? Do I want to, change my relationships or whatever? But getting you to a point of self-knowledge where you can understand who you really are as opposed to who you have been, whether by circumstance or, trying to live up to other people's expectations and whatnot. And I think in writing that book, both of us even further solidified that this was the right move for us and that we could handle whatever came up. And I have to say, it's been a much easier transition, I think, than either one of us expected. We live in an area that's considered a resort, kind of, and most people here do speak English, which is a challenge in the other direction, because we want to learn to speak Portuguese, and people try to be accommodating, and they'll immediately jump to English to help us out.
Mm-hmm. But backing up just one second, where can people find this book that you're talking about?
It's on Amazon. It's called What Should I Do Now? A 14-day jumpstart program. And you can get it on pretty much any Amazon. It's a print book. I think we'll try to come up with an ebook in the next few months as well. Writing, obviously, it's something I love, so we've been pushing some of those. We're also working on a book that will be an ebook, and we'll have that out in probably a month or so, about 101 tips for moving to Portugal and beyond, because what we realize is a lot of people will join Facebook groups and other places to get information, and it's kind of like when we started Food Travelist, the reason we did it was that there was so much conflicting information on TripAdvisor that we didn't know who to believe because we didn't know any of those people. So we asked our friends, and we thought, wouldn't it be nice if you could ask your friends where to go, what to do, what to see, what to eat, what it's really like. And so this book will be 101 tips of things like we're talking about now, and some resources and things to help people who do decide to move to Portugal. And it certainly has been getting a lot of press lately. I don't know how accurate any of it is, but we've talked to a lot of our friends and people who are opening up themselves and their minds to possibly going to live in another country. And we will always stand up and say Portugal is a great place to consider.
So what advice do you have for people who are considering making big changes in in their lives? So it would be read your book.
Well, it certainly will help clarify some things for them on what they really want, which I think, honestly, making a decision is the hardest part, making a decision to make a decision.
And I would add to that, too, that I think the most important aspect is knowing that there is a decision to make. Because I think a lot of people, whether it be they're in a job they don't like, or they're in a relationship that they're not happy with, and they think they have to stay. I mean, they think that there's no other choice. This is my job. This is what I've done. And then there's nothing else I can do. Well, what would happen if I left my job? All the kind of insecurities that come out around making changes, and really, I think, and again, going back to the book, I think the book does help, work through that process, because it is a process of accepting and thinking in a different way of, okay, I'm not going to be going to the same job anymore. I'm not going to be going to the same home anymore. I mean, things, these are huge, decisions. We're certainly not making light of them in any way. It's a process. We had to go through it, as well. It's not something you just wake up one day and say, hey, let's move to Portugal. This was something that happened over a series of years, for us, so I think it's definitely a process and something that people need to work through as well.
And if the first landing doesn't work, try something else is one takeaway I have from you two.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, we know people who've moved all around Portugal, and we know people who've moved from other places to Portugal, like they were living in Finland and they did that for a few years, or they went to France and they did that for a few years. As my dad would say, nothing except for death and taxes are irrevocable. So if you make a mistake or you do something that doesn't work out, again, just try something else.
I mean, because even when we went through those times where we did have those insecurities and those fears when we were still living in the United States, I mean, to me, the fallback was always, I'm one of these people that I have to have a plan B, right? And it's like, so my fallback was, we can come back. It's like, we can go back. I mean, we didn't have to go back to Wisconsin or Chicago or anywhere else for that matter. We needed to, we could go anywhere we wanted to do, to make that choice. So I think that it was like, okay, it's okay if it, not everything works out all the time, and everything is not perfect. I mean, I think for us, moving here is for us, it has just been a sheer joy. We've met a lot of great people here, expats and folk and Portuguese people and people that that we knew through other friends. It's interesting how small the world is when you start meeting other people and saying, oh, do you know so and so, and it's interesting because we've met people here that we have friends from Chicago or New York or other places. And that's been a real delight for us too. So I think we've been very fortunate to meet a lot of great people here, and our goal I think is to just add more to the culture here and to really absorb more of the culture here and make it even a better place than it is.
How has your experience of life on a daily basis changed by being in a place that makes you happy? And it shows.
Wow.
Well, I think that the first way, that's obvious, is every single time we put up a picture either on our website or on social media, people are like, oh my gosh, you guys look completely different, which is kind of frightening in a sense, because like, how bad did we live before, but were we expressing stress or worry or whatever it was that now when people see pictures of us and they're not, they're not staged or anything. We're happy, we're relaxed. I think I think in some cases some of us have lower, blood pressure, and I think it just shows, in the photos you see of us.
I would attest to that. You look frighteningly happy. Like, my God, I want what that woman had.
Yeah, and I think that has been the most, the comments that people, really have the most, and also, people just saying we've inspired them, to think about maybe, not just moving to another country, but doing something different in their life. And to me, I think that's been a real surprise, of something that came out of this as well.
It's also been really fun for us that people have come to visit, and we're kind of the welcome wagon for the area that we live in. And we've met people, even just people we don't even know, that contact us and say, hey, we're coming to your neck of the woods. Could we, go out and have lunch or give us a little tour around? And some of these people have had an eye to moving here, and some that we thought, oh, they'll never move here. Right. And the next thing we know, you guys inspired us so much. We're building a house on the island. It's been really gratifying to see that people do come here, and there is a sort of infectious spirit that the Portuguese have always had. This idea that exploration and discovery are wonderful things, and the idea that Portuguese people go into the world and explore it, and then they come and bring all those discoveries home, is kind of a feeling that I think some people are catching in reverse, that they want to be part of that kind of exploration and being in a country that inspires you to live your best life. I know that's kind of a hackneyed phrase, but the reality is I think both of us feel we have so much more joy in every day, even meeting the challenges, that it's fun to wake up in the morning and say, what are we going to do today? That's going to be great.
Yeah. So do you have any parting words of advice for people who are wondering how they can move from dream to living?
I would say just make the decision, and work through it. Think about what the other possibilities are and, what you can do. And as we've said before, one thing just may lead to another. Your one decision doesn't have to be your final answer. You can go and do something else differently. But, and people say this all the time, it's really trite, but we only have one life to live. And you might as well do what you want to do and try to be as happy as you can be in that life.
Yeah, but I'd also say that you might surprise yourself and allow yourself to think back to what you enjoyed when you were young, before the world came crashing down and told you you can't do this or you can't do that or you must do this, you must do that. Because I think somewhere inside,
I said you're quoting me.
Well,
somewhere
we are
inside.
great minds think alike, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think somewhere inside all of us, we have that part of us that longs to be free from the constraints that we put on ourselves in everyday life. And if you never let that out, and I know a lot of people don't want to because it's scary. It's like letting the genie out of the bottle, right? Mm-hmm. What happens if I discover that I really do want to go live on a, tropical island and sell, coconut water all day? What's so bad about that? If that's what you want to do and that makes you happy and you can find the way to make it happen, why wouldn't you? I think many of us get caught up, in what the other folks are around us are doing or thinking of us. Most people are just living their lives, and I think we all ought to do the same.
Well, I thank you so much for sharing your process and your story and your envy-inspiring adventures with everyone. Everyone, you can find Sue and Diana at foodtravelist.com and look for their book on Amazon. And my forecasts are at empowermentunlimited.net. Thank you again so much, Sue and Diana, for being with us.
Thank you, Kathy.